Perfect. And we are live now for FMA discussion episode 133. I'm here with Tuhon Brandon Jordan. And this is one of the episodes that I'm most looking forward to because we talked about Mandirigma Derobio, Mandala Mandirigma. But before we start for the episode, I just want to give a shout out. If you guys do not know, there is. I'm sorry I didn't do this last time because we had tech issues, just like we were having it recently. Sign up for the seminars of Guru Roger Agbolos and GM Bobby over the weekend. All you need to do for the GM Bobby seminar is check South Florida, Balintawak, and Kuya Roger. You could just message the FMA discussion. So without further ado, let's start now with our episode. And that was one of our longest pre-interviews yesterday, Tuhon Brandon.
Yeah, we had a long time.
That almost stretched like a full hour.
I know.
Yeah, and the first question that was messaged to me yesterday, because quite a few people watched our pre-episode, about 80 people during just that first 4 hours.
That's awesome.
So one of the first questions I got is what for your ranking, why did you use the word Tuhon? Because like typically those are associated with several island systems and different systems. And how did you come about? Because normally, like with the Derobio guys, we hear Maestro, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that title was given to me, so it wasn't really something I selected, to be perfectly honest. At one point in time.
Oh. Yeah, that's perfect.
That's kind of what happened at a certain point in time. Teaching and traveling around and studying different arts. I actually was awarded a Tuhon title. There's Tuhon, and then in Indonesian arts they also have a title called Guru Tuhon or Tuhon Guru, which is like a senior master teacher. So I was awarded a Tuhon Guru rank. I hold that rank in Pencak Silat. I was given that from the late Mahaguru Cliff Stewart and Hati Kalindi Iyi and several other grandmasters had awarded that title to me years ago. So then later on in the FMA community, people started calling me. So it stuck.
Well, can I give a mad shout out because we can we give a mad shout out because I'm just trying to elucidate in the FMA community. In the FMA community, they might not know who he is, but he is very well known to me. Rest in peace, Guru Cliff Stewart, as one of the hallmarks of Silat here in the West. And he's good friend of mine, Stephen Barnes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's just unfortunate we lost a good one.
We really did. He was legendary. He was a great man, great teacher.
So continue, sir. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
He's like a George Foreman sized dude. It's like a straight.
Guru Cliff was a legendary person, and it was definitely a huge honor and a blessing to be able to spend the time that I spent with him, training and just befriending him and having him as a mentor for so many years. So he gave me that title in Pencak Silat. And then as time went by, even Senior Grandmaster Dan Medina, my Derobio teacher, he wrote in his book on Derobio, when he wrote a credit in the front of his book, he listed me as Tuhon Brandon Jordan. So then as time went by, of course, the name took. More people started referring to me as that, as Tuhon. I mean, yeah, in Derobio, classic Derobio, most people are, at the advanced levels, so we have like several different shirt levels in classic Derobio. Usually when a person reaches a red shirt level, the person is referred to as a maestro. And so then there's several levels of maestro beyond that. And then there are a few of us who are ranked as yellow shirts, which is like the completion of the system. So some people go by the title of master. Some people go by grandmaster, like my teacher, Senior Grandmaster Medina. He ranked me and recognized me openly as a grandmaster years ago. I just don't use that title. So, I like the title of Tuhon, honestly, just because a lot of people in the Filipino martial arts community, a lot of friends of mine are Southeast Asian, Filipino, Indonesian. And so honestly, like a lot of the people in the community and students that I taught started referring to me as such as well. And so I continue to use it out of respect for the fact that others have, chosen to honor me with that and to carry that with dignity and with the integrity that it deserves, because, it's a big title to carry in any type of art. So it should be done in a respectful way.
Now that you told me about your connection, I did not know that connection with Cliff Stewart, and so we're related in that one sense, because I mean Stephen Barnes is a really good friend of mine, and him and Cliff is like this. They are like this. And so now I thought about other questions to ask you at the end of this interview, and I'll bring that up. Because I want to know about your training with him, and I also want we lost another great one when we lost Kalindi Iyi early during the time of COVID. We lost him to COVID.
Yeah.
And we lost another great one, another luminary. So it's just a hard time right now, in that community.
Was legendary. He and Guru Cliff were best friends. So I actually met him through Guru Cliff. When I would go and do training and took private lessons with Guru Cliff, oftentimes Baba Kalinde would show up and would sit in on classes and private classes and training that I was taking. So it was a blessing to be able to have, masters at that level, both of them to recognize and to award me that. So, it just after that, Tuhon, whatever, it just kind of stuck. I didn't really want to go around using the title Grandmaster. Some people have suggested that I should, maybe one day. I don't know. It just depends. I like Tuhon because for me, I like to use titles that are familial titles, things that represent one's connection to the community, and also that things that represent your responsibility to the community. The way I came up with my family and things like that, titles and things that you use aren't things that you award to yourself. It's things that people in the community recognize you as such, and then people begin to refer to you as such. So just to answer your question, it wasn't something I just came up with. The community decided to start referring to me as such, and out of respect, okay, so this is what we're going to use.
I didn't say you came up. I didn't say you came up with that. I asked like how you came about being called. Yeah.
I had a lot of people ask me that question, and and I thought about it for a long time. I deliberated on it. I was like, should I use that title? I asked a lot of friends of mine, other people, and said, listen, so people are calling you and this, because I know that title, it carries a lot of weight back home in the Philippines. And of course, there's mixed opinions about every single title under the sun, depending on what part of the Philippines you go to. Some people say that depending on how you spell it, can refer to other things besides being a master or a grandmaster teacher, whatever. Some parts of the Philippines, it might refer to the creator. Some people say it refers to God. So, I've always tried to, get a good understanding about certain titles and how they're used and things like that. And it just kind of stuck, honestly. It just one day I just said, hey, let's.
Who's to question you if Cliff Stewart gave you that title? I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Like, Cliff Stewart.
I questioned Mahaguru about that. I said, "Are you?" Because it showed up in the mail. Honestly, when I received the certificate, it wasn't like I showed up and there was some whole pomp and ceremony or whatever. I literally checked my mailboxes when I was living in Seattle, Washington, and there was like a big, like little cylinder in the mailbox. I pulled it out, I opened it up, and I was like, "What's this?" So then I called him. I called Kalinde. Hey, I have a certificate that says, Tuhon Guru, this and that. Are you sure? Like, was there a mistake? And said, I don't really feel, you always want to continue to do more. So I don't know that I feel like I'm ready for that. And, Guru Cliff, in typical Guru Cliff fashion, said, well, I don't recall asking your opinion about it. So that's the title that you have, and that's it, and it's over with. Yes, sir. That's how Guru was.
For people that don't understand, like how does that Cliff Stewart was? He's basically a George Foreman proportioned dude that can like Juru and Lanka neck break you to death. Like he's used that art out there in the field, like dispatching bad humans. And yeah, he's a bad dude. He even has stories with Donnie Yen because he worked in a movie with him. I don't know if you heard about that one.
I didn't know about that. I didn't know he worked with Donnie Yen, though.
Yeah, well, I'll share it to you. I'll share it to you off camera.
It doesn't surprise me because he worked with everybody. I mean, Guru Cliff had black belts and, you know, instructorships in more arts than I honestly can even remember. I mean, he had more belts than like a men's clothing store. I got a black belt, and he was a 10th degree in, you know, in American Kempo. He studied with, you know, with Ed Parker way back in the day. You know, he studied.
Didn't he go with Steve Muhammad? Was it Steve Muhammad as well? Didn't he? Yeah.
Guru Cliff was one of the founders of the BKF, the Black Karate Federation, with Steve Muhammad and Ron Chappelle and several other grandmasters back in the day. So he was one of the founding fathers of that. You know, he studied with Dr. Mong Ji and Burmese Bondo. I mean, so many.
I'm sorry we're talking about him because you know, we're talking about, we wanted to talk about your background.
It's okay.
And I know we have gotten a lot of complaints, and I just want to check those people. I'm gonna check them right now. I'm gonna check them right now. That's not an inadequacy of FMA discussion. Every time people are here, we always ask them about integration of their other arts with FMA. So whoever gave those messages out to me a couple of weeks ago, I hope I see you in FMA festival, man, because you know, I'm gonna knock on your door. How are you? So continue with the story, sir. I mean, I'm really enjoying this. Like, you know, the whole. What was your first art? What was your first art prior to FMA?
I studied Shorin-ryu with my cousin long time ago when I was a kid, 5, 6 years old. I started learning Shorin-ryu from my cousin. You know, and then matriculated into different arts. I studied Shotokan and Taekwondo and Tong Sudo. You know, I dabbled in. You know, I studied some Chinese. You know, Kung Fu, Hung Gar. You know, different systems and things like that. You know, I've always been a student of knowledge. I've always liked learning and trying to get my hands on whatever I could. My mother did martial arts and stuff like that, so I learned a little bit from my family and from my mom and my dad, you know, stuff like that as a kid growing up. And then, you know, as time went by, maybe about 15 or 16 or so, was when I met Senior Grandmaster Dan Medina. And that was when my Derobio Eskrima journey began with him. And then, of course, you know, traveling with him and studying with him throughout the years, you know, I was fortunate to meet a lot of other grandmasters and masters of different systems that, you know, would come to his house and would meet him and, you know, exchange information. And of course, I got to be the guy that got to be on the receiving end of it, you know, and experience, you know, different training and things like that. And sometimes, you know, Grandmaster Dean would say, hey, why don't you go work out with my friend and go stay with, you know, I met, you know, Richard Bustillo, the late Richard Bustillo, and so many, you know, great pioneers and legendary, you know, grandmasters that I got to meet through him. And then as time went by, he said, hey, now that you've, you know, completed your studies here, I want you to go train with this other teacher, go train with this guy, go train with that guy. And, you know, I spent a lot of time, you know, in my training with different, you know, different teachers. I would always go back to Grandmaster Medina and always would reference what I was learning from other people back to him. Hey, I learned this on a C-Lot.
I just had a quick question because I got a private text message. I want to do an ad hoc question for you. When you trained with the GM Bustillo, was it out here in Carson?
No, it was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Like, he came out to a camp that we had in Albuquerque. Grandmaster Medina put on a camp, a martial arts camp up in the mountains in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And so then Richard Bustillo came out to the camp. I got a picture with me and him somewhere in there, somewhere in my archives. And he came out for like a week or so. And, you know, so he did his camp, he taught, and then he stayed at Grandmaster Medina's house for several days afterwards. So I got to, you know, we traveled back and forth going antique shopping and, you know, we trained and work out, and I got to experience, you know, some of his background, you know, with his Dosipadas and some of his Jeet Kune Do and things like that. So, you know, I didn't study with him like extensively, but in that period of time of getting to experience and to this, you know, when you have people who are close friends and they've known each other for decades, you get access to some things, seeing some things that you might not have gotten if I had just shown up off the street and said, hey, I'm Jordan, I get you this and this, you know, but because, you know, being friends with my Derobio teacher, that opened some doors for, me to have him share a little more freely with me from some of his heritage and what he taught.
And what I say is, like, I really love you guys because all my interaction, I like what you guys do. I am, even though it's a system that I don't practice, like it's like one of those, like, man, I need to learn that. I admire what you guys do just because I'm a big fan of grappling. Obviously my base art is FMA because I started when I was like 7 years old, but my base art after that is boxing and wrestling. I wrestled in high school.
Okay.
I wrestled in high school. I got injured in college, so I wrestled for a semester in college. And
that's awesome.
Our school got rid of its Division II program. But so it was great. I was like, well, I got injured anyway. But basically, like, when you see Derobio, my interpretation of it is very similar to what Gia Medina said. Is kind of like the Shaolin China or BJJ of FMA.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you look at it and like, wow, that doesn't. You don't want to be in one of those locks, folks.
It's very uncomfortable.
and I think that's the reason why you guys get along. Like, out of all the different FMA styles, you guys have so many chapters, like different kind of schools of thought: South Carolina, Florida, San Diego, Hawaii. But you guys all relatively get along. And my theory about that is, like, because you get put in those locks, it burns your ego away.
It does.
That's my take. That's my take. you don't have time to be boastful. You know what I mean?
and many of us, I've made a point. There's still some people in the Derobio family that I still need to go out to go meet formally. But a lot of us, who have been in the Derobio system for a long time, many of us know each other personally. So some of us have, like, had the locks put on or put the locks on each other. So, when you go through that type of thing and whatever, like you said, a lot of ego and things like that gets thrown out the door. You learn a lot about yourself when you go through pain, and especially when you go through pain to that degree, because at least when I was coming up learning these locks, they had to be applied. Like, it wasn't just, hey, I'm just going to put you here and hold it so you can kind of see. It was, like, your eyes were watering. The pain was it's like you have to feel it, to know how to apply it truly, you have to go through it. And a lot of that chips away at your ego. I mean, there's something very humbling about somebody puts their hands on you and you're just in crippling pain. And no matter what you can do, you're thinking of doing, there's nothing you can do to change the situation that you're going through. Then to try and observe, breathe, laugh through the pain. And, and a lot of the locks in Derobio, even when it comes to countering it, some of our locks, when you've already been submitted and you're already in that pain compliance situation, now how do you counter the counter? How do you recounter? And so, it's like you said, it's certainly like a Chin-Na of Filipino martial arts, or even like a Hapkido. There's a lot of very intricate locks that I haven't seen in every art. I'm sure there's many other arts that have some, but these are really unique. The way that they're done, the way that they're applied, even, a lot of the locks can be done interchangeably, empty-handed, and things of that nature. So, I think those types of things probably have helped us to have a very pleasant outlook and demeanor, and to be very, very friendly and very joyful in our approach when we, work out and we get to meet a lot of people. Everybody I've met in Derobio has all been really good people. We all have the same love for the art. We're all very interested in perpetuating and passing it on to the best of our ability. Great Grandmaster Padoy, did a wonderful job of passing on this heritage to his family and, his own, blood family, as well as, his students and disciples that, we're also fortunate to be a part of his heritage. And it's a blessing to be a part of something like that. It doesn't happen every day. I think when you come together as family and everybody sees each other as such, and it's ideally, families have disagreements from time to time, but when it's really a family type of oriented situation, it changes things. Most of us, myself included, I don't charge for classes. I don't have a storefront. Nothing's not saying there's anything wrong with it, but the way that Master Padoy taught, the way that my teachers taught me, Great Grandmaster Medina taught me, Derobio and things like that, just came to class and worked out. Like your payment was your good character, how you showed up, how you behaved. You know, everybody ate. We go out, we train. You go out to get something to eat afterwards. You know, there's always been a lot of focus behind that. And that's something that I think a lot of us are, you know, in the Derobio family, I think those are some of the things that we really kind of put first is students aren't just students, but people are our family members. You're part of your tribe that you're bringing into your community. So it's fun. I enjoy it.
So I even enjoyed it in a sense that I learned a great deal about applying that, having three type of methodologies, because there's the empty hand concept that you guys have.
Yes.
There's basically the impact tool base, right? So, and then there's the blade base, meaning like, so you're experiencing this pain.
Yes.
There's a stick on the other end of that that's going to, you know, smash you in the face or apply the leverage even further.
Correct.
Or a blade, meaning it's applying the leverage as it's cutting you in one of your main blood vessels.
Correct.
So it's like, wow, like from my own research, because I told you I'm making a sequel to Mark V. Wiley's. Of course, I'm not going to call it that for copyrights thing.
Of course.
I've done a lot of research, different systems in the Philippines, and I really believe that's one of the ancient ones, because
it has to be. I think
I don't see any. I don't see any HEMA that's even remotely close to that's sophisticated when it comes to applying the return to sender setup. And then basically it's like, I have your weapon pointed towards you and I got my weapon pointed towards you. You're my slave now. You move, you die, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's true. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in a lot of other arts. You know, I personally, I've been present with Grandmaster Medina when we've been with other friends of his, you know, different Philippine martial arts instructors and things like that. And he's like, puts the lock on him and, hey, how do you get out of that? A lot of times it's like, there's, you know, everyone doesn't always know what the counter is. And so we would say, well, this is what Master Padoy showed was, you know, you counter it like this, or you do this thing, or you do that thing. And, you know, I think the counter locks in Derobio is probably one of the things that Derobio people we're probably more known about our counter locks than anything else. That's the kind of the thing that really stands out about the system, that people are always asking questions about is the locks.
Your base template is like 150 something, right? Or so it was too close to 200.
There's 144 locks in the Derobio system, and then Master Padoy also said that at a later time in his life, in his dreams, an additional 25 counter locks had been transmitted to him as well. He also taught to selected students and disciples in the system. So 144 plus and another 25 on top of that. So that's what.
So let us address that, because you know a lot of people, they have different paradigms and modalities of thinking, right? And some they don't accept a lot of these esoteric, or shall we say more exotic or supernatural, you know, explanations for certain things.
Yeah.
But if you've done any kind of research on psychology, on your linguistic programming, maybe not a scientific sense, but in a philosophy sense, like the concept of Carl Jung's collective unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
This is old hat to us in the Philippines. It's just a matter of like of life. Like we don't like talk. We don't even need to explain it. We just accept it.
Right.
You know.
It's
so
true.
so if like if your GM all of a sudden told you, or maybe even you had that experience, it's like, well, it kind of worked in my dream, because like my master came back and visited me, and he's been dead for like 20 years, but he said, you know, do it like this, right? And then, you know what? Oh yeah, you know what? I'll find out today, because I'll pull it off in one of my students. They'll see if it works.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. Like, you know.
Yeah, it is. You know, when you
that's just the reality. That's just the reality of it. That's just the reality of it.
It's the truth. You know, when you've been with somebody for a long time and you've had a close relationship with someone, you know, even when that person passes away or whatever, you know, you still carry the memories of that teacher and their essence, the essence of who they were. Every time you practice the art that they taught you, a part of them is still with you. It's still a part of you. So whether or not somebody believes that somebody came in a dream or whatever, for me, that's not as important, because if you studied with that person directly, then everything else that you learn about that art, even if it came in a dream, still came from the person who was your original teacher, because they're your connection, your living connection to the art. So whether or not they directly transmitted it to you in a dream or it was indirect, they're still your connection to the art. And so they're still how that information was transmitted to you. So, you know,
and I think another way to look at it, and just to make a preface on that experience of what was said to Braulio Bedoy, a lot of Filipinos think in a way. So I'm going to transfer it to a Western paradigm.
Of course.
The philosopher William James has the concept of radical empiricism. Bertrand Russell has atomic logism. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but essentially what it is reality is what you experience. So
Yes.
so let's say that you saw an apparition.
Right.
It's not a fake apparition. You experienced it.
Correct.
Clearly, it influenced the synapses in your brain, and you saw it, right?
Yes.
Your neurons fired. Is like, wow, there's like a lady in this room. Like, you know, it's like, is she like a dead lady here that bought this house before? It happened. I don't care if people say it's like, oh no, that's a figment of your imagination. No, but the event happened.
Correct.
That's the point.
That's
and we just let it go. We just let it go. We just learn from it. So continue to on Brandon, because I'm really enjoying like the story with the 150 locks and 140.
So, you know, that's the hallmark. I mean, I got to see, you know, there are some arts that do, you know, have some different, you know, perspectives behind how they train and different things that, you know, that are their methodologies. You know, once I had spent, you know, a good amount of time, you know, with Grandmaster Medina, I lived with him for a long time, for several years. So I was fortunate to, you know, have access to training that I might not have otherwise gotten had I not, you know, had lived with him and things of that nature. You know, and then, you know, once I finished grad school, I went to school for Chinese medicine. So once I finished grad school, you know, I was sent to Colorado. And so at that time, I went up to go study with Grandmaster Willem de Tours in the Kuntao Silat system. And that was a long time ago. It was over 20 years ago. So then I went out there and I spent some time with him, and I spent a lot of time with some of his, you know, senior graduated students, you know, some of them have gone on and developed systems of their own and things like that. Some of the other seniors of the system. Spent a lot of time with them and got to see, you know, some overlap, some similarities, at least things that I noticed that I found as themes of what we were doing inside of what we were calling Derobio. And I'd say, oh, wow, this concept is here in this Silat Sarah system. Oh, but in Sarah, they do like this. Okay, in Derobio, we move on the female triangle when we're defending. We use the male attack triangle when we're attacking. And then, of course, as you progress, you know, where the angles are and things like that, it doesn't become you're not fixed with having to always move a certain way. Now you understand your body, you have spatial awareness, you understand the weapon, what you're capable of doing. Where you find yourself is where you find yourself. But there were some things that I found inside of some of the Silat systems, particularly Sarah and others, Indonesian systems, that I said, this is a really fascinating concept of looking at footwork, because we're already doing this similar footwork inside the Derobio. But what if I did this while I was doing the Derobio at the same time? And
so let me get this straight. You trained with Kalindi Yi as well? I studied
with him at the times that I would be with Mahaguru Cliff. When Kalinde would be there, he would interject and say, hey, let me show you like this. So it was like, I didn't study with him as my formal teacher. It was more like my uncle. So when I would be with Guru Cliff and Kalinde would be there, they both would put hands on me and they would exchange. So Guru Cliff would say, we do it like this. Here, throw a punch. And then Kalinde, here, throw the punch. Let me show we do it like this in the African systems. We do this. Actually, you know, Baba Kalinde was one of my inspirations for making so many trips back and forth to so many different parts of West Africa. He was my motivation behind making those trips like that, because when I heard about his experiences and things of that nature, and just brief time chatting with him, that was a lot of the impetus behind You got to go home, brother, and go see some of these other things that are going on over there, and incorporate, you know, this into your awareness, into your knowledge base of what it is that you're doing. So, you know, I just, you know, one thing I was always encouraged by all my teachers was to look for similarities, look for things that this art has in common, rather than looking for differences. There's always differences in anything that you're doing. But at the same time, there's always a lot of similarities behind things. You know, Grandmaster Medina, for example, he does Derobio, he does Arnis Kuntao, he does, you know, Arnis 63 Generals, like so many different arts that he practiced in addition to the Derobio as well. But we use Derobio as the foundation because Derobio, like you said, it's a very ancient system, and it gives us sort of a template because it's such an old art. It gives us a template of being able to look at pretty much any other art that we study. We're able to understand it and to at least come away with some of the key concepts behind understanding. When you have something that's kind of a base root art, you know, you see some things that are like kind of like foundational systems. When you look at other variations, other extensions of this, it's like, you know, it's like Bruce Lee said, when you understand the root of it, when you understand the root of a tree, you understand all of its branches. So Derobio, being such an old ancient root art, really has opened up our understanding and appreciation for a lot of other martial arts, and being able to see where different things might fit in, you know, from a Derobio perspective. Oh, I can use this particular thing here from this art or from that art. Maybe I enter with Derobio or whatever, but depending upon where I find myself, I have some other avenues and some other things, some other extensions of things that I can do. So that's what I've always enjoyed about these arts, and what I've always enjoyed about the teachers I've studied with. It's just that everybody always had a very open mind. Everybody always said, I stood with somebody else, say, hey, this guy's my buddy. You like what I'm doing, you should go and train with this guy because he also does this and this and this. And so go pick up what he's got and whatever. And then, you know, I go back and come back the next week. Hey, what'd he show you? Well, he showed me this and this and this. Let me show you how I counter that. Here, do that to me. Oh, this is how I counter it. And it was always a back and forth. You know, it was like it's like a sibling rivalry of sorts. It's like, you know, you have somebody, it's your brother, everybody's trying to get over on each other, but it's like the person who's in the middle of it, you get the most out of it, because I was able to see so many different perspectives that each one of these teachers had. You know, it added to my knowledge base, and it added to, honestly, my appreciation of the different arts, you know? And that was, for me, that was the impetus behind how Mandala Mandarigma came about, because my teachers, many of them, you know, the late Sijo Wayne Welch was my Bagua, Xingyi, and Taiji teacher, because I studied internal Chinese Kung Tao, and for a long time, I'm an instructor in those systems as well. And so my teacher would say, so every time we would do things in class, for instance, in Bagua, Uncle Wayne would say, oh, that Derobio, that's Bagua. I show a movement, that's classic Bagua. Oh, that's Fujin Song, you do this and this and this. Here, do that again.
So I'm actually going to say something, because not to piss people off, I'm just going to be real with the Filipino martial arts community. There's a lot of styles back in the South and Central Philippines that that's closed door knowledge, that it has a lot of Bagua in it. They just don't want to talk about it. Yeah. Basically, that's their internal component of their martial art. I'm not going to name names, because I've heard that from a lot of people now, for about 4 or 5 people now, you know, that told me that in private. So it's just like, we're not going to name those systems, that I'll get my head chopped off by the community. But that's a real thing. So continue with the Bagua connection, sir.
You know, just, you know, that was my experience. You know, I would show things. And so in Bagua class, for example, because we had so many different instructors, so many people from so many different backgrounds, the class would usually be about 4 to 5 hours for class. The first hour of class, I would teach Derobio. Then in the next hour, another one of my classmates might teach some Sila, and another guy would teach Taiji. And then Uncle Wayne would close it with Bagua. And he would say, you guys do this and this and this. And Derobio, you did this. And this art, you did that. That's all Bagua. You know, and so he was always, you know, whatever art you practice, you see it through the lens of how you do it. He said, but why don't you add in this internal dynamic? add in this breathing, this breath work, put this dynamic behind this. Here's how you could uproot the guy. Do this, you know, like, so for example, I was called the bamboo dragon because I trained with rattan sticks. So they called me the bamboo dragon. So all of us all had different dragon names inside of the Bagua system that we were training with him at the time. Uncle Wayne was one of the colleagues of Willem de Suarez. He was one of the uncles in the system, one of the grandmasters from long, long ago. And so as time went by, when I would go back and forth and train with him and things, and when I went through a Baisi ceremony, which was a discipleship in the system, when I received instructorship from him and took some vows before the ancestors, he said to me, you know, I've been showing you all these different things of Bagua and Xingyi and Taiji, and then you train with Guru George, and you've done this with Conrad, and you've done this with this guy and this guy and this guy. You can't take everything that you're doing and call it all Derobio. We all love Derobio, but what I'm saying is you can't just call it that, because you're not giving grace. You're not giving credit to all of the influences of everybody who shared knowledge with you. And so it's not fair to just call it this one thing. He says, so I want you to think about putting together a name of something that will allow you to give grace to everybody. Of course, keep the roses. I'm not saying change it, but what I'm saying is don't make the mistake of taking everything that everyone has shared with you and calling it one thing, because it's not that one thing. It's that and all these other people who've also shared information with you. And, you know, he says, so take it and find a way to put these things together in such a way that they gel together and that they work well, but present what you're doing in such a way that allows you to give credit to all of your teachers. So that's why I came up with the name Mandala Mandarigma Derobio, which just means essence preserving environment of the warrior arts. And then we put Derobio at the end just because we start with Derobio. In other words, I use that as like I use that as an entry system to gauge people, to see how people are. And because I love the art so much, and it's such a foundational system for me, and it's allowed me, it's, you know, Derobio has opened a lot of doors for me personally. It's allowed me to make a lot of friendships with a lot of really good people that I might not otherwise have had I not been exposed to the art and really, you know, experienced the spirit of brotherhood and of what this art teaches, and survival, and, you know, all the things that we come into martial arts wanting to train in. And so then after that, I went to all of my teachers, all my grandmasters, and I presented my manual. It took me about 3 years of all the different things I had been training and sitting down up and at night for years and years and years, putting things together and, you know, putting together different manuals, whatever. And so I presented all this to them. I said, this is the presentation of all the things that all of you have shown me. And each thing is taught separately. Like each system is its own, you know, it's its own entity. So I show everything separately, and then I can show you, here's how we connect the lines of all these things together. And so all my teachers signed off on it and said, perfect. Now you got it.
For people that are not familiar with Eastern thought, tell them what mandala means. Because, you know, I know because I'm a Buddhist. So, yeah. But go ahead.
Mandala in Sanskrit means essence preserving environment of, or to preserve something. Mandala is also what you see many times when the Tibetan monks they'll take sand, and they'll take colored sand in order to make a mandala, which is also considered to be a three-dimensional structure that explains how the universe comes into existence, so to speak.
It's a schematic of what creates the universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. It's a schematic of explaining how things come into existence, and they'll engage in different prayers and things like that. And when it's all done, in the spirit of understanding that everything is impermanent, that nothing remains, everything, this innate art is all swept up and then put in a cloth, and they take it and they give it back to the river and things like that. They, in other words, they will donate, or they'll give the essence of the benefit of all their prayers for the benefit of all sentient beings, human life, plant life, animal life, things of that nature. So I use the name mandala because of that, was one reason for it. Also, mandala also refers to ancestral practice, ancestral understanding. So these are arts from the ancestors. In other words, in all indigenous cultures, when somebody passes away, they're your ancestor. If it was your mother, your father, whatever, many different, Southeast Asian arts and all Asian arts, you go into different restaurants, they got a statue, or they got a little altar in the corner somewhere. They got orange that they're given to one of their ancestors, or, things of that nature, where they're always remembering, In other words, when you practice an art form and your teacher has passed away, you're still connected to them as an ancestor. You're remembering them because you're keeping what they've done alive. And by doing so, you're also keeping these teachers alive. You're carrying them on the palms of your hands. And so I use mandala because mandala, in addition, it's like we use that when we do our martial arts, right? If you're looking at the triangle is what? It's a mandala. So a mandala. You can take that and you can raise that up from being on the floor to raising that up three-dimensionally.
Yeah, you make it a three-dimensional structure. I actually had a vision like that I never understood before, like what my master was trying to tell me in a kind of distressa type manner. And it that's exactly what it did. It like became 3D instead of being a two-dimensional thing. It blew me away because I saw the Vesica Pisces, and there was a female triangle and a male triangle, and when you put them together, it becomes a star.
Yes.
When it comes together like that, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, it was a vision. It was great. It was great.
That's how I came about it. I said, okay, listen. One day I heard it. As I had been, trying to figure out what to name it. How do I give respect to everybody that has shared information with me, and also be able to continue to grow? Like, I don't want to be in a box, and say I only do this one particular thing or whatever else. Well, what can I use? And one day I just heard mandala. I said, okay, mandarigma is a warrior. Okay, it's somebody who's noble and strives for these different virtues. There are heroes, that are celebrated over time. So then the name mandala mandarigma, I said, okay, and we'll attach Derobio to it. So then from there, we just continue that the name took. I went to my teachers, and all my teachers, including from Grandmaster Wayne Welsh, Grandmaster George Morin, Mahaguru Grandmaster Cliff Stewart.
Man, you train under the Jedi Council of America, man.
I like to travel and train with a lot of different people. What happened to me was this. Every teacher that I would train with, they all knew each other. And so then they would say, I've been beating up on you here for a while. Why don't you go get some training in with this guy? Because this person is my Kung Fu brother from 30 years ago, but he specializes in this one aspect of the art that we do, that we all train in the same teacher, but he specializes in this aspect. I want you to go now get exposed to that aspect that he specializes in and bring that back. So I would stay with that guy for a few years, and he would say, let me introduce you to my other brother who does this other speciality. Now you get exposed. And so it just, next thing I know, I'm training with all these different, teachers, and, they all knew each other. Some of them didn't. I've actually hosted conferences where some of my teachers who didn't know each other, I brought them all in the same room. Like, they all knew of each other for years, and then they finally met. And it's like, oh my God. Oh, and so, when I tested some of my guys in San Francisco, for example, for the first time, I brought several of my significant teachers out for them to see. You see the curriculum we put together all these years ago. Now I want you to see the fruit of what we've actually done and what's been put together. And so I said, here's the curriculum. You have it. Go ahead and test everybody, and let's see what they have it. And then they can see it. That's my influence from this and that. But you changed the footwork so that you could incorporate the weapon for this, or you did this, and you did that. And it was nice being able to see that, because that was my homage to them, to let them know that I'm grateful for what it is that they've shared with me and that they've passed on, and that it's my desire to keep it intact and to pass it on with the integrity that it deserved. And so that's just been, from there, it's just, the Derobio and a lot of these arts and different teachers, it opened up a lot of doors. You know, when you have an open mind and you enjoy what you do and you're having fun doing it, you know, you meet other people who have open minds and are enjoying what they're doing as well. And it, you know, it opens up doors for people to share, and, you know, people let their guard down. You know, a lot of people I met, you know, that people say, oh, that guy will never teach anybody. He doesn't show anything. Anybody's very quiet and whatever else. You just invite somebody out for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or get something to eat or whatever. You just talk shop. You don't come up showing up looking for something or asking for something. And then eventually people just offer, you know, to share and want to show you some different. That's how I met Guru Cliff. When I met Maha Guru Cliff, I actually showed up for a different seminar. I was there to train a different art, a different silat system that had been brought into town, that I had heard about this art for years and years and years. And so I wanted to show up to do the seminar. And then Maha Guru Cliff was there. And I had no idea that he was the host of the seminar. And he saw me and I showed up and I had my shirt on. And he says, oh, you do these arts? And yeah. Took me outside in the parking lot. Why don't you show me a little bit of this? So I started showing him some different things. He hadn't even identified who he was at the time. And, you know, he was just very low key about it. And then he starts applying things. And like everything I had been doing for years, he made me look like I didn't know any martial arts at all. Like I had never studied anything at all. And
Cliff is a bad man, dude.
Guru Cliff was like the Yoda of martial arts. And he's like, oh yeah, I wrote this book on war within arm's reach. I've done this. I've done, you know, a lot of teachers that my teachers had studied, like the late Grandmaster Neri Babao. Guru Cliff studied with Neri Babao. Oh yeah, I know Neri. Yeah, like, he showed the cool. And next, you know, he's doing like all the forms and sets that my teacher Grandmaster Medina had showed me. Guru Cliff's doing it. And I'm like, I didn't know you knew that. Oh yeah, I do this. So he played with me like a cat playing with the ball. Like he was one of the first people, one of the few people that, you know, I'm getting together with him. And even with all the things that I had learned, it was just like he was going through it like butter. And then of course he specialized in pressure point Dimmak Marma Adi knockouts, which at the time I thought, that's a bunch of BS. That's not real. Somebody has to comply. Nobody's going to just hold their arm out there or do something while someone does this to you. And literally, Guru Cliff's like, come at me with whatever you got. Like, I want you to really try to take my head off. And I'm throwing a punch and whatever, coming at him, attacking, and I'm trying to be light. He's like, don't insult me. Come at me like you mean it. And next thing I know, all I remember is I threw something and I was literally asleep on the floor. I was unconscious. I wake up, hey brother, you all right? Yeah, get your ass up off my floor. Let's get back to work. And that's how Guru Cliff was. After that,
you can apply it if you're like George Foreman proportioned and sharp like he is. Yeah. I mean, can I share a story so that we can have this recorded for posterity's sake forever? You know that his brother is LAPD, right? Or part of the LEO, Guru Cliff's. Mm-hmm. He dispatched of like 5 dudes, like basically doing crime. Yeah. The cops show up to that thing, and it's good that his brother is a cop because they probably would have gotten rid of him because they couldn't believe how like one man could do so much damage.
Right.
With like 5 people, like we're like this.
Yeah.
I think one of them, like the emergency room, and I think a couple went to the ICU or something.
Oh my God.
I mean, he's a bad man.
Yeah. Yeah, you really.
Here's the thing. I never met him, but this is my own personal story. What happened was I was gonna go meet. Man, I can't share this because I'm gonna make Steven look bad. Stephen Barnes is a famous writer.
Yeah, I know him. I know. I've never met him in person.
So he wrote for the revival of Twilight Zone, you know, in the 80s, right? And he wrote one of the recent Twilight Zone episodes. He wrote for Baywatch in the 90s.
Wow.
Done a couple of best-selling books with Larry Niven, Jerry Purnell, luminaries in the science fiction field. And what a lot of people don't know, he's a bad martial artist too. He trained under Guru Dan back in the 80s for a solid 3 years.
He stayed with Stephen Flint too in Sadak.
That's right. So he's a bad man too. He's a bad dude too, right? We're supposed to meet up, and what he was afraid of meeting me because he was like, he approached supposedly, this is his story. He approached Guru Cliff. Like Guru Cliff is like kind of like Anakin Skywalker kneeling down, like, you know, to Palpatine. Is like I accept all your teachings. It's like I gotta prepare for this, you know, young buck or whatnot because I want to cross hands with him. So needless to say, he trained with him for like several weeks. I couldn't touch him. I mean, I couldn't touch him, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like silat wise. But when he picked up a stick, I showed him what I'm capable of.
Right.
And I was like, well, enough of this empty hand stuff. I was like, let's do some weapons. And I was like, all right, let's go. And so it was a vice versa. Like how well he did with me with the stick, with touching hands with the silat is how well I did with him with weapons. But
yeah,
Guru Cliff is a bad man. It's just sad that we lost a good one recently. He's been ill a while. They said
he was sick for a long time. Guru Cliff was a very private person. There were a lot of us who were his seniors that didn't know what all the details of his health and things like that, because he didn't talk about it very much. My biggest regret with Guru Cliff was I had been invited a couple years back to come out to one of his camps. He asked me to come out and to present my system at his camp, and he had brought together a whole like who's who list. And so like to get invited to Guru Cliff's camp to present at his camp was like that's a big deal for him to extend that. And at the time I was in the middle of a move, and my wife was pregnant at the time with our second child, and I just couldn't get away to get out there. And so I thought, oh, Guru Cliff, no worries. Hey, I'll come out there in the next year. I'll come out and see you, and I'll definitely be there to present at the next camp. The COVID hit like it did last year, and then Guru Cliff made his transition. So I never got to, I didn't get to see him again after that. And I wish circumstances had been different, that I could have had that opportunity to come out there to take him up on his offer.
I'm sad I never got to meet the man. You know what I mean? Because I would have, because that's kind of my one weak point. I want to work on my silat. Yeah. But everything else, I think I'm all right. You know what I mean? Because I was like, Stephen Barnes, if you're hearing this, come on, man. My FMA is mad chronic, bro. you train under the best.
The silat's a good art. I mean, all these arts are good arts. The funny, for a long time, what was always funny to me was, there's always, in any arts, there's always some, I don't want to say it's rivalries is the right word, but there's always a competitive nature in the arts that we practice. So, here I am coming into silat with an extensive FMA, Filipino martial arts background, and all the silat guys are like, yeah, you guys do all the stuff with the sticks and everything else, but we do this with this footwork. We've got all these other sophisticated empty hand systems that we do and whatever else. You guys don't really practice it, the same way. And then vice versa. In Filipino martial arts, we look at it and say, oh, well, the silat arts, maybe some of the weaponry isn't quite the same. But as I started to look at and to see and study these arts more closely, I started seeing that really, like, to me, in my own opinion, I felt like these were like two halves of the same coin.
Yeah.
They're different arts. I'm not saying that they're all the same, but there's more in common than there is not in common. And and when you're looking at things from a principle-based, perspective, you can see, oh, this idea is shared by this other system and whatever else. Sometimes, in learning, sometimes students will provoke their teachers and say, well, Master so-and-so said that you guys don't have a counter for this and this and this and this particular system. And so sometimes when students will provoke the teachers in that way, it gets the teachers to open up and show a little bit more. Oh, he said that? Let me show you how we deal with that. And then you learn more. And then you go back to the next person. And you say, he showed me a counter for that. And I know you said there was no counter for that. But what he showed me, after what I used, what you showed me, I couldn't counter him. Oh, really? Well, here, try this. And, you write this stuff down, you add it to your notebook of knowledge, and, and you grow. Teachers expect you to not just, when you have really good teachers, they expect you to also to be shrewd and to use your mind behind how you ask for information. You don't just say, can you give me this? What are you doing with what's been given to you? Okay, I practiced it. I've tried this in this particular scenario. but this thing didn't work. Well, show me how you used it. I did like this. Well, this is why it didn't work. So, you know, sometimes you hear this from students from time to time. People say, I have challenges in learning, whatever else, but sometimes it's you have to be clever. You know, in Chinese martial arts, sometimes they say the student has to steal the art. You hear many stories of, like, for example, like Yang Qinfu, who was one of the founders of Yang style Taiji. They say that he stared inside the window of the Qin masters, observing to see how they were practicing Taiji, because he was a servant of the family, and so he couldn't be taught formally. So sometimes in some of these arts, you have to have a very clever approach to how you go about learning in order to get some of the things that maybe you might not always have access to or might not be as freely given. So when I would hear stories from some of my teachers and things that they went through, you know, I would apply similar strategies to things that my teachers had shared with me behind how they were able to get access to learning, you know, different things of that nature. And I always, you know, made a point of trying to introduce, you know, people that I was working with to one another, because, you know, no matter what, at the end of the day, no matter what art you do, you know, it's still a brotherhood, hopefully, when you're dealing with, you know, people who have a balanced perspective and are trying to do, we're, you know, trying to take care of our families and our loved ones, whether you're in law enforcement or military or whatever else. At the end of the day, everybody wants to come home. So, you know, you get people that come together and will exchange information, will share, you know, different things. You know, Guru Cliff's perspective on how he did what he did was just unlike anything. Like, he would say, you guys studied martial art for years. What I'm teaching you now is martial science. And martial science is different, because martial science, you have to get into the specifics and break it down. Why does it work? How does it work? When does it work? Where does it work? What's the counterfeits? And it's very specific. You have to be able to, it's like you have to present a thesis, and then you have to be able to defend the thesis. So he's like, in martial art, you can express yourself. But when you're in a combative situation, you have to have certain things that are part of your toolbox, that you know that no matter what, if you do this type of hit or this strike to somebody, you know, no matter who the person is, if you hit this guy with a baseball bat or whatever in his kneecaps, you know the kneecap's going to be blown. Like, we all know that. There's no conditioning somebody to getting hit your kneecaps hit with a baseball bat. He said, so you need to, when you're talking about martial science, what we're talking about is the specificity of your practice, of why you're doing what you're doing, so that when you're looking at things from a martial science perspective, the objective is to come home with as little damage to yourself and maximum damage to your enemy or your opponent. So, you know, coming from, getting to experience both of them was, for me, it was a real joy and a pleasure to see so many, some of these people were just like Guru Cliff was like a mad scientist of all martial, like every art I would mention. Oh, and this is that art. Oh, you trained that too? Hold on a second. Here's a picture of me with this guy. Let me show you that. I'm like, every art I can think of, like, you've studied all these arts, all these people. How do you know all this? And he was an encyclopedia of information. And even Grandmaster Medina, I mean, just, so many things he would show was like, if you blinked, you missed it. You show a movement, like, can you show that again? And he never could duplicate the same movement twice, because he's just going off of the energy of what you gave him.
I want to see what he knows about, because he was trained by Nar Babao Sr.
Yes.
They know the Z. Did he teach you the Z?
If he taught me the Z, I don't remember him calling it that.
Well, because the thing is, I know that Nar Babao it was trained by one of Miguel Marvar's lieutenants, supposedly, like an older person. I don't know what they call it. Some places call it Harada Tagam Batangueño. It's like a Batanga style. So it's like a Z pattern. And
yeah.
There's different. Here's the thing. There's different versions of that particular thought system. It's not just one thing. It's like from that province, there's different interpretations of that concept.
I bet there is.
And I want to see like what he knows, because like I'm from there, and my family is like a soldier family to that clan. Because that was one of the last generals to surrender during the Philippine Revolution.
Wow.
And what ended up happening is he had a lot of lieutenants.
Yeah.
Some of those lieutenants settled all over the Philippines, and then they kind of propagated. They like spread out that thing.
Yeah.
So it's no longer from that province. Like other people know that system. So it's a Z. So he taught you that.
When I learned it from Grandmaster Medina, he sometimes would call it Arnis Kuntao, or he would call it Baston Batangas, was what he learned from Neri Babao. And so it was like there were certain set forms in the system of what he learned, and then there, of course, was the offense and defense of that. So I trained in that system with him as well. With Grandmaster Medina, I want to say, I think he certified me in something like 7 or 8 different systems is what I trained in with him. A lot of different arts, Kali, Sikaran, Majapai, Derobio, which was Majapai, which is like his way of how he brings all of his different arts together. I trained in Black Master Sphinx Karate from the Black Master Sphinx Karate clan of the Philippines.
That's a hard style, man.
I have a second degree in that system. A lot of.
Were you in a horse stance for like 10 hours?
When I used to train with Grandmaster Medina, we used to, do all the iron body and the breathing exercises and the dynamic tension and all that stuff. And the horse stance like that, we would like warm up class with that out in the park before we get to the other training. So because he always felt like body conditioning and things like that was very, very important. In your
I love how Cali Doug said just the type truth about FMA. I have to thank you for you bringing up the Bagua connection, because if we're going to talk about secrets with a K, because we don't have C in the Philippine language, really the special sauce in some of those old systems is really the internal.
Yeah.
The breathing and the internal arts is what gives you not only longevity, but it gives you old age, and it gives you that kind of like I touch you, you die kind of power.
Yes, it does.
You know how some fighters have that, like Thomas Hearns is like, they or like Julian Jackson, like they didn't even look like they hit him hard, like it's like this.
Yeah.
That's the internal is what gives you that.
It does. I mean that like for me, for example, with all the different arts I had been learning from Grandmaster Medina, because of the way that he teaches and his approach. There was a lot of different things that he would, and he has such a broad background that I said, you know what? Some of the people that he studied with or things like that, and some of his backgrounds, I wanted to go in and to get at least an exposure to some of these other foundational. He always would talk to me about, Bagua, Xingyi, Taiji. I studied when I was in grad school. I had a classmate of mine who was that was my first exposure, was Liang Zinpu Bagua from Li Ziming, was one of the grandmasters in China for this particular system of Bagua. And my classmate was a student of the late Grandmaster Vince Black. Vince Black started the American Tong Shidao Association. He stayed with Master Shu Hongqi. A lot of people in San Diego and in Southern California knew of Grandmaster Shu Hongqi from Taiwan. And so I got exposed to that. And when I finished in grad school, I would go back and forth with my classmate at the time, and we take, private training classes, with Vince, learning more about the Bagua and the Xingyi. And when I would see that and see how they were doing, in Philippine martial, in most martial arts, when you're trained with a staff, you've got some sort of a rattan staff or some other wood staff. These guys were like training with like the barbells from like lifting weight, like iron bars. They're doing thing with that. I'm like, are you serious?
Actually, so giving the secrets with a K away, that's actually what you're supposed to train with.
You see, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So here, and they hand me this bar, and I pick it up, and I'm like, clang. It's like, clang. And they're laughing at me because I'm still used to using muscular skeletal strength.
Right. Right.
You have to root this tendon is what you have to use your tendon strength, because tendon is what connects muscle to bone.
Right.
And like, that's what's going to take any art that you do to the next level. And when I saw it, I said, this is why a lot of these FMA guys, I'm not saying all, but I was like, but this is what makes this art even more deadly.
Right. And let me give you, again, secret with a K. The reason why the helo, the massage is so important is because of the fascia. The tendon and the fascia is what you need to strengthen.
Right.
The footwork, what makes you really strong is, like when there's really several ways for you to like grab onto the floor. There's
Right.
quite a few things, because you could have it where it's just your toe that's bouncing kind of like Pacquiao, or you could have it like completely rooted like that, right? But when you do that, it's no longer just your weight that you're hitting the opponent with. It's the weight of the entire ring. So now it could be a person that's 400 or 500 pounds, like the Incredible Hulk hitting him.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
What you're saying is you're speaking to exactly like that was my experience. You're like, listen, when you hit somebody, you don't want to just hit him with this. You want to hit the whole earth, like everything of your body, your weight.
The ground actually becomes a platform, like a pillar.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And when I started seeing that, for me,
what I train with, like an actual axe head. that's the old school way, man.
when I was coming up in Derobio in the old days, we always, like back in the day, because getting access to like the nice rattan sticks and stuff like that, we couldn't find that in New Mexico. So we used to have to go to like the rattan furniture stores, and like where you're getting like the super thick rattan like that. Yeah. So shout out to Kuya Roger Agbolos, Big Daddy Kane, Roger Agbolos. That's what we should name it at. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, like this, right? Yeah, like that. Like that's what we were training with. We've been buying like several 6-7 feet of these furniture rattan that they would sell at the warehouse, and then cutting it. And so you're getting a lot of heavy weapons training. Because and of course you're working your grip, you're working your tendon strength, everything else, and you have to hold the weapon differently, because you can't get your whole fist around a stick that's that thick, so you have to train it differently. So I was used to that, but then to go in now and start training with iron bars and some of these other heavier weapons that we see in some of the Chinese internal arts. To me, that like expanded my understanding on a whole other level. What was the impetus behind it was that one day I was in class, we're outside the park, and we're holding, we're holding a stance called Pichin. Pichin in Xingyi, it's like splitting fist, right? It's like you're chopping wood, so it's a splitting fist that you're doing like this. And as we're holding it, my shoulder is up, and I couldn't drop.
You couldn't do this. You couldn't do that.
I couldn't bring the shoulder and drop it down. So my shoulder's up like this. The teacher literally walks up to me. He goes like this. My shoulder's like this. He goes like this. And my shoulder just goes pop. And it just just from the touch. No press, just a touch. He says, that's internal. Once I saw this, I hooked. I got to say, this is some whole other Jedi type of stuff. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And other teachers in Filipino martial arts, like I had seen, I had seen it inside their art, but just maybe it wasn't being said to me. Maybe I wasn't ready for that.
Can I be honest? Can I be honest, Tuhon Brandon? Yeah. It's either you weren't too ready, or they just weren't ready to share yet.
Right.
Because it is kind of like a Masonic thing, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
it really is. That's why there's a lot of controversy recently about like all these comments that we've been getting. There was like 5 of them from like several different people. They're talking about like, we don't want to be like this, blah blah blah. Man, I'm like, shut the hell up and train, bro.
Yeah,
because you don't know crap. You was starting, bro. Like you know what I mean? Like you just knew.
Right. When people say things and you say it in social media or whatever. And everybody doesn't always know how to show up. But what people maybe don't always think about is we don't know who all is watching. We don't know who all is seeing and observing. And so sometimes if you don't show up well, somebody who might have been willing to share information, whatever else, you might have inadvertently closed the door because you just didn't know how to ask the questions or things like that. Right. One thing that was my experience in in Southeast Asian martial arts, and also I really came to understand it more so in Yoruba and West African cultures. It's not just the questions you ask, but it's also how you ask the question. A lot of old masters and teachers, it's not just about, hey, can you tell me this? Can you tell me that? Can you show me this thing or whatever? There's a certain way that you ask a question. And in Western culture, the mentality is to just go direct, to ask, hey, what about this? How do you deal with that? How would I counter this thing? People just approach the teacher in that particular way. But in a lot of indigenous cultures, especially like in West African culture, there's a way that you ask for information. There's a certain maybe posture or certain greeting that you would give to an elder physically. Like in Filipino culture, there's mano po, right? Yeah. You're doing that.
So let me actually explain that. Because you know how the Maori have they put their forehead. They're not. It's not the nose. It's the forehead, right?
Yeah.
What's this?
The third eye.
Yeah. It's like the seat of your soul. Not only that, in scientific terms,
right?
What's the frontal lobe? That's the seat of your right and wrong centers of the brain, like what determines like your morality or whatnot, right? That's why most people that get damaged here in pugilism, they kind of have later problems with the law, right?
Yeah.
So it's like literally you, like when you subserve yourself and you get someone's hand, like and put it in your head like that, you're saying like I defer to you because you have more life experience than me.
Exactly.
That's really what it means. Like,
it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's similar is done in Yoruba and West African culture. In West African culture, they call it dobale. Dobale is like if somebody's much younger in age, what they'll usually do is they'll touch their head to the ground, touch their head to Mother Earth, out of respect to whoever their elders are or their teachers or things like that. Women greet differently, men greet differently, and then depending on your style, like for example, in West African culture, you don't go to people who are elder than you. Either they're elder in age to you, or they're elder in status to you. You don't ask people who are elder to you how they're doing. In West African culture, it's considered rude because you don't have the life experience to be able to assist them with whatever it is that they may be going through. So, in West African culture, we don't ask elders how they are because you don't have the life experience to be able to lift their burden of whatever it is that they might be going through. And so, a lot of things that when I started making a lot of trips back and forth back home, it gave me more of a reference for understanding even. As I started looking back at my experiences in different Southeast Asian martial arts, I was like, wow, this concept is identical. This idea, for example, like in West Africa, when you want to learn something, you want to learn a trade or a craft, or you want to be brought into a priesthood, or you want to learn martial arts, you first have to learn from the juniors, those who are junior to you, and those who are younger, the children. They'll be the ones to tell you different things and whatever, because they also have to tell you how to show up in community, how to talk to those who are the masters and the leaders or the elders of that village. There's a way that you talk to them. You don't just show up empty-handed. You don't do that. You bring something. Maybe you bring some food. Maybe you bring a bag of rice. You bring some chicken or live chicken or things like that. In other words, because you're showing those who are elder that you're not just there to take, but that you're also giving something back, and that you're looking to share. And so things of that nature, like even in Latino culture, and I've seen it in Filipino culture, I've seen it in West African culture. Like, for example, we don't point with our finger like that. We might motion with our hand, or you use.
Yes.
So
we get made fun of that a lot because we were like, hey man, why are you acting like monkeys? It's like, no man, you just don't want to be rude. It's like, hey man, can you pick up my shoe? You're not gonna go like this. You're gonna be like, where's your shoe?
Right. Right. And
that's so cool. It's similar, yeah.
Identical. So I started looking at these things.
Identical.
It started giving me when you're immersed in a practice, whatever you're doing, you get a better understanding of how to ask the question. It's not just the question, but how do you ask it? Like for example, in some African fighting arts, they don't call it a fighting art. It's a dance. So if you want to learn how to fight, you first ask how to dance. And so because the dance might be, the fighting might be concealed inside the dance, but in other martial arts systems, it might not be approached in that way. You might be asking, like, hey, how do you deal with this particular situation and whatever? So when I started, getting a better understanding behind how to ask certain questions, and when the timing of the questions, like the timing is also important. Like, you have to. There's so many things you have to be aware of when you're trying to learn, and when you do that, a lot of elders and older teachers and grandmasters, oftentimes it's like they really appreciate the effort that a person has made to show up well, and that person has at least made a good accounting for themselves as they're seeking for knowledge. And then other things that you're trying to learn, they'll be more willing and more readily able to explain those things. And so like the more the more of those things that I really started to get exposed to and started to understand, those things for me was kind of what opened up the doors with a lot of learning, and things of that nature. It's like Filipino martial arts for a lot of people in America. Filipino martial arts is also like kind of like a starting point. If you're not already Filipino, it's a starting point into understanding the culture as well. It's like it's a gateway into understand the culture. Like you're not just learning a martial art, but you're also learning a mentality and a way of looking at the world and interfacing in the world the way that this cultural group does.
And unfortunately, and I can speak for this because I've gotten a lot of private messages about that, and I don't even respond to them because it's just come from pure ignorance. Right. There's quite a few people in FMA discussion that they only see FMA as an accumulation of techniques and fighting methodologies, and nothing much to that. And you know what? That's why you'll never learn that thing.
Right.
Those things. That's why that will forever be closed to you. Good luck. That's cool. I'm actually happy that that's the case.
Yeah.
I am. See, they don't even. So please don't think I'm being rude by like always staring, because I'm getting like
no, not at all.
Possible like questions for you that are being private messaged to me. So I'm just gonna paraphrase the ones that I'm sending. So I'm gonna try to do this. So this kind of ties into what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you're a king. We went over that in the pre-interview. Yes. I do want you to talk about the more esoteric things that you've seen, not only within your culture, because the thing is, you are the Ivory Coast, right? Western Africa. Most of the transatlantic slave trade is Western Africans. That's why the culture is so similar in Nigeria and all these places, right? Benin, pretty much the bulk of the Black American experience, Western Africa, right?
Right.
In East Africa and Madagascar, there's like, I don't know if you ever heard of the Popobawa, stuff like that. I want you to talk about like the esoteric occultic side of this thing, like what you've seen I really don't care, because you know what, we need to talk about this. I know people are uncomfortable, but I know people are uncomfortable, but like, you know what, I don't care, because I do this from a different perspective. I've been given kind of like, like it's like, hey, just do what you do as long as you don't you're not rude, Julius. Dean told me you can ask these questions, right? So yeah, go ahead, because I want that perspective, because you have a very rich tapestry. Yeah. Because not only are you a Black man in America, you're royalty, right? Yes. You're African American, and you have this tie-in with African arts and ASEAN martial arts, not only from FMA but also Silat, in Indonesian style. So please share. Okay. What just if you could just give a
so I'll give a little bit of a background. So in West Africa, I'm what is known as an Oba or Kabiasi. Kabiasi just means your majesty. I'm a spiritual majesty in a tradition known as Ifa. Ifa, Ifa. Ifa means the wisdom of nature. That is what Ifa means. Ifa also refers to the indigenous faith of Africa. So Ifa is a system of learning. It's a system of interacting and understanding the world and the universe as it exists. So Ifa is a system that was encoded in various signs and symbols, which speaks to the human condition. So it's a system of allegory. Anytime you're talking about various signs and symbols to describe the human condition, you're dealing with allegory. And so Ifa is a particular system that deals with binary code, because the pure language of the universe is mathematics. And so we work off of a system that in the Western world, Europeans refer to as, what's the term that they use for it?
Sacred geometry?
They call it African fractals. Is what they call it African fractals. We just refer to it as Ifa. So in other words, we're reading ones and zeros. So we have a system that we use of divination. Ifa is also a system of divination. So we do different types of readings for people to connect and to commune with the forces of nature, to divine and communicate with the spirits and the ancestral realm as well, to find out what's going on. For example, like I'm in one of my temple rooms here right now. That's why you see this here, this called an ocean.
We actually can't see it from the thing. So can you turn it a little to the right? No, the mask.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. So this is one of my.
Oh, that's awesome.
In West Africa. So this is this room here is one of my temple rooms, the shrine rooms, where I do a spiritual work. I do readings for people around the world to assist them in different things in their life. So in Ifa, we have 256 signs that we call Odu. Odu in Yoruba means dark matter consciousness, or that which is unseen, that which is unveiled. Odu in Yoruba also refers to the womb, because it's how we all got here, right? And so in these 256 signs in Yoruba culture, Yoruba culture, West African culture, is an oral-based tradition, meaning nothing is written down. Everything that you learn inside the Ifa tradition has been transmitted from teacher to student orally for thousands of years. Since the beginning of time, it's been passed on. And so we have different verses. For example, if we do a reading for somebody, we have 256 Odus. Each one of these Odus, which means it's like a verse, you could say it's like a scripture. Each one of these Odus has about 700 to 800 stories per one Odu. 256 Odus, 700 to 800 stories for every single Odu. And each time that story is told, it is told exactly as such. So you are required to memorize those verses. In order to be a competent priest, to be a competent practitioner, most priests or priestesses in West Africa have committed to memory between 5 to 10 verses of Ifa for all 256 Odus. Like myself, I have maybe, depending upon, I have about 25 to 40 verses committed to memory for all 256 Odus. It's a lot that you have to memorize. Herbology, animal husbandry, midwifery, so the full gamut of the human experience, astrology, numerology, all those things. So we do reading for somebody to see what's going on inside of this person's life. What's happening here? What can we do to improve the quality of this person's life? If things are going well, how do we keep it going well? If something is maybe stuck, what is it that we need to do in order to move things back into a position of what we call ire, move it back into good fortune so that this person can be in alignment with their destiny? Because Ifa deals with a particular deity that we call Orunmila. So the Yoruba people, like many other indigenous people, take multiple words and create a contraction of one. So Orunmila comes from the word, a contraction of 3 words. Orun in Yoruba means heaven. Mi is my. La, destiny. Orunmila means heaven knows my destiny, or heaven knows those who will be saved. So in Ifa, we consult with a particular deity known as Orunmila, who's considered to be the spirit of destiny, or the one who witnesses the destiny that everybody chose before they were born. In Ifa, in Yoruba culture, they believe that everybody has a destiny. that they chose before they were born, before they were incarnated. You hear about similar thing in the Bible saying, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So that's, you're talking about logos. The one who witnesses the destiny of all human beings. We call that Orunmila.
It's very similar to the Vedic traditions in like first there was the divine Om.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
sound.
So we work with that, and we have different types of priesthoods. So I'm crowned in West Africa as what I'm what is known as the Obarisha Obatala for America, which means that we have a particular deity that we call Obatala. Obatala is like the creator of all humanity in Yoruba culture. Is the deity is responsible for molding human beings. In Egypt, they knew of him as Khnum, right? So, you know, and in different traditions and things like that, Obatala, some people have said it might sound similar to Obatala in, you know, in the Philippines. So we're talking about some some similar things.
That's the reason why I want you to talk about this, because the thing is, this is also in FMA. And I just get ticked off when people just talk about efficacy in combat and all that. They don't want to talk about these other things that you have to learn when you learn Arnis back in the olden days. Like an example is like they don't even talk about PTSD mitigation strategies.
Right.
There's entire lessons for that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the reason. Continue sharing, because this is very similar to FMA. So
there's a lot of overlap in these things. So what I'll say is this: Obatala, this particular deity, is like it's a society of people that are together working to try to elevate human consciousness and to make the world a better place. So Obatala is a deity that teaches us about our humanity. Obatala, esoterically, Obatala means king of the white cloth or king of white light. Allah in Yoruba means light. Allah, A-L-A. Allah is white. So we're talking about the pure, undifferentiated light before it hits the prism. What happens when pure light hits a prism? It bursts into
splits.
multiple colors, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about how things come into existence. We're not talking about someone's beliefs. We're literally talking about from the beginning of time. We're talking about how things are coming to be, how things are coming to pass. So, you know, our ancient ancestors long ago had codified and studied many things about how the divine order of the universe comes about, because everything in nature exists in duality. White and black, left and right, cold and hot, everything exists in duality. Everything we talk about in the world, we talk about in something in comparison to another. So that's the law of duality. So I'm the king of this of Obatala worshipers or people in the tradition for America. So basically, it means that I'm like the spiritual head.
You're like the Dalai Lama. You know that particular thought system.
Yeah, because, you know, like for example, we have different types of Obas or kings in West Africa. What happened is in the old days, this was hundreds of years ago, when the British came in and colonized Nigeria and colonized all of West Africa. What they did was they changed up the system of kingship that was done in West Africa to where nowadays you have governors and things like that. So you have traditional rulers of a town, somebody who's like the ruler, like that. This town has got 200,000 people there. This person is like the ruler of that town. He's in charge of overseeing that. And then you have people who are the spiritual rulers of the community, of the spiritual and taking care of the spiritual health of the community. So I'm a spiritual Oba. I'm a spiritual king. That's like a Dalai Lama or a Pope or whatever you want to call it. So that's my responsibility, is to preserve the culture and the customs and the tradition of our of West African practices, and to keep the integrity. So I have a lot of students around the world that I teach and that work with me. I've initiated, taken many people back and forth to West Africa here over the last 14 years, that I've initiated them into various priesthoods in West Africa. I've initiated maybe about 500 people into the tradition.
What have you according to one of the questions there, like what have you seen of the interface of the numinous and luminal when it comes to FMA or the martial arts world? Can you share? Are you allowed to share like
So
these kind of
I've seen
supernatural stories?
I have seen there are places in West Africa where you know, they have different types of talismans and different types of protection from things like knife and from bullet.
Anting.
Yeah, it's anting. And, you know, I know everybody said, you know, it's about what you believe and whatever. That's okay. I'm not talking about anybody's belief. I'm just telling you about what I've seen, and I've documented it. Like I videotape everything that I'm saying here. I have videotape of this, and I have people, even students of mine, who've been with me and seen it with their own eyes, that can attest to as such. We weren't drinking. We weren't under the influence of anything. We know we've seen. So, for example, when we want to test medicine like that, we call akoshe, a particular medicine to see if it works. They'll put the medicine on a chicken or maybe a goat, and then we'll shoot it to see if it works. Well, if it doesn't, it's fine. The chicken's dead. We're going to eat him anyway. No big deal. But, you know, when you know it works, and they'll test it so many times to make sure that it's efficacious, that it's going to be beneficial. Some people, some of my teachers, will go so far as to test it on themselves, and they'll show you. Like, I've seen it. You know, we use this and this and this. Here, grab this machete. Or whatever else. And literally in the middle of a conversation, the guy just walks up to him and just jabs him with the machete. And next thing you know, he's chopping at him. I mean, and I've done it myself. Chop and literally like no mark, no bruise, not even a nick, whatever. Like, there's no way. I mean, and we're talking about like before they start, they'll take a piece of paper and go cutting it, so you know you're dealing with a sharp blade. And it's not some funny stuff going on. This is really so.
Typically, we have an event. Sometimes it's not yearly. It's called Haring Bakal, King Steel in the Philippines. They do the same thing. Like, you know, they will cut the paper. Sometimes they kind of chop like a board. Like, see how sharp this is? Right. And it's like those balikbayan boxes. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then you're like, huh? And then they would stab through it. See, it goes through, right? And they do the same. And it's just how, you know what I mean?
It worked. You know, it is what it is.
The power of the mind, or you know what it is. Whatever. I don't know. You know,
our forefathers had knowledge of things that has been passed on for generations. That is just, you know, this is alchemy, right? If we're talking about metaphysical science, it's still science. So that's why we say Ifa is the wisdom of nature. In other words, we're studying how things come into existence. We're not talking about religion, right? Because the word religion and the word spiritual, right? So spiritual is different than being a religious person.
And when you said alchemical, alchem, as in Egypt,
right? We're talking about ancient Egypt. So I'll explain it like this. Everybody, one of my teachers said to me a long time ago in Africa, he says, you know, when we share knowledge of Ifa and whatever, people say, you know, I'm not religious, but I consider myself to be a very spiritual person. So my Baba in Yoruba means father. My Baba says, so what rituals do you practice? And people say, what do you mean? It's in the word spiritual. Spiritual, S-P-I, spy, to wrap or coil around. Rights of, al is if you look at the word Allah, is the name for God. Elohim also for God. So spiritual means the rites or rituals or practices that connect you to the source. So if you're saying you're a spiritual person, by the etymology of the word spiritual, by definition, you're saying that you engage in some sort of ritual practice. So the difference is, are you consciously aware of what you're doing, or are you doing it unconsciously? So when people say, so a lot of what we do is we study things on a different level. So when you understand that, then you can kind of go into piercing the veil of different things that might not, that it's just, the difference is just that these are just things that people don't consciously think of in their day-to-day life, you know, about what's going on, how we do this, how we do that. Like, I have teachers of mine that'll sit back here and hold something in their hand and say, yeah, I'm going to use this incantation. Like, for example, when I went to West Africa on one trip, my Baba says, you know, you've learned this particular thing, these spiritual sciences and this knowledge and so on. Let me share this particular thing with you. So he sat back here and said, here, say this incantation. So I say this incantation. He hands me a bar of soap, little piece of soap. I put it in my hand. He puts a leaf literally at the tree. He said, you see the leaf? Holding your hand. I put the leaf in my hand. And I just like this. And he's pouring water from a bucket on my hands. My hands are soaked, dripping water over the bucket. His son's pouring more and more water. He says, now ask for fire to come from your hands. I kid you not. Flames coming out from the medicine. From the soap and water. Like those things, when you wash your hands with soap and water, do most people have fire coming out of their hands? No. He says, now, you see, and it happened to me. Like you can't make this up. I videotaped this.
And
like
if that was potassium, that would have burned through your bone. Because if their explanation was it was kind of like a magnesium, you know, potassium thing, yeah, that would have burned through your bone, like a magnesium flare.
Right. So he says, so let me show you something now. Say this incantation, hold this in your hand, and point it at this rooster, and command it to die. Okay. So I said, I'm saying it's not working. He says, like this. He takes it, he grabs it, he holds it in his hand. He says the incantation. I kid you, no one touching it. Drops. He said, oh, you think I'm making it up? Hand me the next one. Dropped. Next one. Dropped. Now you go. And literally, I spent half of my trip with him saying, I want you to practice this until you can do it. I have videotape of me doing it. I'm not gonna like put it on social media or whatever, but you know, and I have students of mine who went with me and actually saw it. We can bear witness, and like those types of things, like you can't make it up. I'm not saying there's a real world practical application behind, like, you know, just, and there is application like of things that we use it for, but some of these things, like it's just it's magic. Right, it's magic. Yeah. Right. So, you know, understanding like magic is it's basic. You know, it's like that's not, people shouldn't get fixated on magic. You know, that's one aspect of things. People get stuck.
Because in the Buddhist sense, like if you get fixated in it, it's Maya, it's illusion. Because you got fixated on a trick. You didn't get fixated on the universal truth or lesson.
Exactly. Sometimes magic is useful. Sometimes it can help you to be able to accomplish things that maybe you couldn't otherwise do. I've seen people in Africa point at a palm tree and start chanting at the tree. And the tree all of a sudden start doing like this. Swaying back and forth like somebody's swinging it like a rag doll. No wind outside. And all of a sudden he's doing like this. And the tree is swaying back and forth. So there's a lot of things that our forefathers and our ancestors, you know, have knowledge of. And those were things that I've spent a lot of years going back and forth to West Africa to get access to and to get knowledge of and to train. So when I started in the practice years ago, I was just initiated into the priesthood. I spent years training as a priest and studying and, you know, and dedicating myself to learning the craft and things of that nature and doing work for clients and things of that nature. And then as time went by and the village decided, okay, we're going to make this person to be a chief priest within this particular thing. And then, you know, years and years goes by and more from there. You know, next thing I know, I get called to the capital in the tradition in West Africa by the leader of the world to come out and to receive the title, that was given to me. And just West African culture, we're not superstitious people. Like, in other words, we always say we know ourselves, we know who we are, and so when a lot of study is about herbs, understanding herbs and medicine and roots and how to heal people, how to heal the body, because in West African culture, we don't believe that all illnesses is physical in nature. Some illnesses might be from spiritual nature as well, or psychological or emotional nature. But sometimes we call these things elenini. Elenini in Yoruba means self-created demons, meaning sometimes when people harbor or they engage in behavior that is antithetical to their existence, it's not good for themselves as well as humanity. Sometimes really bad things begin to manifest and take on a life of their own.
Like a tulpa.
Yes.
Like a thought form. Yeah.
Like a thought form. And it creates suffering. And in Yoruba culture, they believe that some of these things can become entities that actually now can begin to cause harm to the person, to their body. Sometimes people have different things happening inside of their body that's not just physical. So you're not only treating the physical body, but you're also treating the spiritual body, the energetic body. There's a lot of,
in a scientific terms, you're right, because like you live in harmful behavior, that causes epigenetic damage.
Of course it does.
The research is solid in that now. The last 18 years have been very eventful time for epigenetic research. One of my interviews in my other YouTube channel is by a doctor from UCLA, who received this training UCLA and UC San Diego, Dr. Tarfour, which is like you. He's also a shaman, but he's a the Shipibo shaman from Colombia, Peru area, right? Okay. And exactly as you told me. So just continue. I'm sorry I interrupted. I just wanted to.
No, you're not interrupting.
Because he's backing that up with actual research on top of he's an actual shaman. He's a medical doctor, but he's also a shaman, like a classically trained medical doctor. But go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh, because what you said is exactly. There's some things that cannot. Some things can't always be explained. I'll just leave it at that. Some things can't be explained. Why this thing is happening, how this thing is happening, and so on. Like a lot of people who come, in example, into the Ifa tradition. Like Ifa is a very formal, structured system. It's not like Hogwarts. You're not showing up here at a magic school to learn sorcery and things like that. There's a very specific, in most schools of Ifa, most people take anywhere between perhaps 5 to 10 or 15 years of dedicated training as an apprentice with their master, learning the craft. And they have, so imagine if you got a room, you got a bookshelf filled with 200 books. In West Africa, every single one of those books they have committed to memory, page by page, line by line, paragraph by paragraph. They have all those things memorized. So, it's that's how the study is done. That's how the knowledge has been transmitted and how it's been shared. Like it's a formal study, and then people take it into whatever area they want to do. For example, the priesthoods in West Africa, it's like getting a trade. It's like going to school. Somebody might be a diviner. They help people to find out what's going on right in their life and not happening. Somebody else in West Africa, they consider people who are midwives to be priests because they're helping people to have babies.
Right.
In other words, what I'm saying is we're talking about guilds. We're just talking about schools. But in West Africa, we call them priesthoods because we consider these things to be sacred. Anybody who helps someone to be able to have babies, that's a sacred job. So it's considered to be a priesthood. We just don't call it that here in America.
There must be some kind of synchronicity about this whole thing, because I'm just talking about this with I can't mention the group because they're in the back scenes of FMA. But I was saying, like, you have to be careful about how you talk because there's different guilds in the Philippines. Like assassination guilds.
Yeah.
And I said like midwife guilds.
Right.
And then certain things, I was like, there's certain guilds you don't want to piss off. I was like, comprende, like, you know what I mean? And I don't think that person was getting my message. You know what I mean? Like,
everybody doesn't, everybody's not, plugged in or doesn't understand the same, things on the same level.
Yeah. But I was talking to that hidden FMA group, and we were just talking about guilds. That's the perfect word to use. Exactly, they're guilds.
It is. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it is these guilds. I mean, like, for example, somebody else might be an herbalist. They might just specialize in plant medicine. This guy gets up in the morning, he goes out into the woods and harvests these particular plants and grinds them into a poultice and things like that to use for somebody who's got a broken leg or somebody who's got a stomach problem or any other issue. So in West African culture, herbalist is considered to be a priesthood. In other words, anything that you're doing to try to help humanity is considered a priesthood because it's considered to be sacred. It's considered to be something that's very special and that should be maintained. So everybody kind of gets like the same base education at the start, and then people decide what they want to specialize in. Somebody might decide they want to be a, sorcerer. They want to do that particular thing, whatever. Like everybody, what I'm saying is everybody doesn't learn the same things, and everybody doesn't know what everybody's training in and learning. Right. That's what we call in Yoruba, we call it awo. Like, in other words, I know some people are saying, we be careful with certain things. There's nothing that I'm saying here that you can't look up online and read in the book. I just want to make that very clear. There's nothing that I'm saying here that is not written. You can read it on Wikipedia. You can look it up on Google. I can even tell you numerous books that I have here in my library where this stuff has already been published. When the United States government sent out the CIA to come out to Nigeria to go and have people to be initiated into these traditions and to go and do research of their findings on all this. I'm not revealing any secrets by saying this.
Yeah, because that was around the time of Project Stargate. I'm very much aware of that. Yeah, Scanate. Yeah, that was that same time.
That's what we call in Ifa. That's what we call Awo. Awo means secret. Meaning, yes, there are many things that we can't say and that we can't speak on unless somebody receives an initiation into certain things. Then you have permission to do that. But obviously in certain settings and things like that, certain things we can't say and whatever. But everything that I'm saying, you can even look this up on YouTube. Like this isn't this isn't something that's, that's like, oh my God, nobody knows about this. We haven't heard about these things. And it's just that it's that everybody hasn't read and hasn't looked up on the internet to see about different things and whatever.
Well, it becomes a secret in the sense that because it's unspoken and they haven't been guided to look to this direction.
Yeah. And it's secret also because in Yoruba culture, for example, giving away secrets is considered to be a way in which you lose spiritual power.
Yes.
So when you've gone a long way and you traveled very far to get knowledge and information, you don't just go out and freely just start telling everybody what it is that you know and what I don't say about things that I know or what I don't know and whatever. Listen, I'm a student. I'm still learning. Everybody is. We're always still students until the day that we close our eyes for the last time and our time here on the earth is done. It's just that certain things are secret until somebody has maybe explained something to you. It's like explaining like how do you make fire. See, a long time ago people thought that was magic, right? Oh, making fire. Oh, it's this spirit or this magic and whatever. And then people realize, wow, if you do like this and this and this, and I'm not saying there isn't a magical aspect to it because there certainly may be, but certain things are described in a certain way because we're speaking in allegory. In other words, we're speaking in such a way that certain things are communicated in an encoded fashion to other people who may be in the same tradition, whatever. There's certain things that you'll say that allow you to be able to learn and to be able to grow and things like that. I've seen a lot of stuff in West Africa that, I can't say because it's just like, wow, Like you just, and the truth is that if I said it out loud to everybody else, 95% of the people aren't going to believe me anyway. Like, oh, he's just making that up. It's a bunch of BS. I never heard of that, whatever. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, we all have different. There's some things that there's some things in life that you see that you just kind of put it in a box and you just say, you know what? I'm not even going to try to understand that or figure out what that is. It is what it is. And you just, you know, you leave it at that, you know? So some things that I've, you know, there's been a lot of, I've seen people who are very sick for reasons that just didn't make any sense. And doctors said, this person, you know, is not going to make it, or there's no cure for this and whatever. And, you know, they go and they do some spiritual work and whatever. And then whatever it is that they have is miraculously improved or cured as if they never had the condition ever at all. And so, you know, just because I had spent so many years in all these martial arts systems, you know, and, you know, you're reading all these books and you're hearing all these stories about stuff, about all these different cultures and traditions and things that are used. Like I wanted to see other aspects of life and the world and how things work. Like, you know, you get to a point, there's nothing wrong with learning martial arts. I enjoy it. I've been doing it most of my life. But after a while, like, you're not just training it just to be able to defend yourself. Like, the truth is, at the end of the day, all the stuff that you learn over 40, 50 years, you're not going to use all those techniques in a real fight anyway, right? You're not going to use every single one of them. This isn't like a Rocky movie. You're going to be in the ring for 12 rounds.
No, I've always interpreted it as some kind of alchemical process to the betterment of your soul.
Yeah,
that's how you should see it. Like, here's the thing. It's fine for me if you want to do that because you're some kind of rich boy that's never experienced any kind of real violence and you want to be part of a fight club. I get it. I understand. Or it's like you're a scared person and you're just looking for some kind of self-defense.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that was my reason for starting martial. Like, I wanted to learn how to protect myself and whatever.
Or it's some form of way to, you're part of a diaspora and it's your feeling of connection back home. I really don't care. I'm saying the original intention of it, and to me the deepest intention, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What we just talked about. That's the real purpose.
Yeah, you know, just I'll just say it for myself. This is just from my own perspective. I'm not saying this is the case for everybody. Obviously, because this is my ancestry back home, you know, in West Africa, whatever. You know, the truth be told, in my own experience, and this certainly may not be the case for everybody, it just didn't seem to me that a lot of the different things, like, you know, you hear about some of these different stories and different experiences, you know, spiritual practices and things like that. I always was fascinated about that stuff. I think a lot of people are when you're kids. Everybody's interested in all these different magical tales and hear about all this stuff and whatever. You know, and I certainly had a lot of very enriched experiences in martial arts and learning self-defense and things of that nature. But for me, I realized that if I really wanted to know more about myself, who I am as a person, who I am as a man, how I interact in the world, what my place in this world is, as well as maybe some more understanding of things of a spiritual nature, my teacher, one of my Buddhist teachers, Tibetan Buddhist teachers, because I was initiated in that tradition a long time ago, he told me, you need to go back into your ancestral practices. You need to go back home to where your ancestors come from, because every culture has something similar to one another. He says, but you're going to find the most medicine and you're going to find the most clarity and answers for you as a person going back to your ancestral home. So obviously for me, my ancestral home is not the Philippines or Indonesia. It's West Africa. So I'm not saying that there aren't people. What I'm saying is in all cultural traditions, most cultures are very secretive and very select about certain things that are passed on to people that maybe are not indigenously born into that culture. And I'm certainly not somebody that wanted to come in here and appropriate another person's culture. So I said, well, let me just look within my own and to see what it is that I can, what is my culture? But that alone opened doors to where now, as I'm interacting and continue to meet more Southeast Asian martial arts practitioners, Filipino, Chinese, Indonesian, whatever. Now it's like I have more interesting things I can have in conversation. Ah, you know, in Africa, we do like this and this. Oh, the Philippines, we do so-and-so, so-and-so. Oh, in Indonesia, we call it X, Y, and Z. So it was like, it allowed me to open door. This research of going back to my own home allowed me to be able to have another opportunity to be able to have more connections with other people in their own cultural traditions as well. And it enriched my appreciation and my understanding of these things. Because, I came up hearing stories about Grandmaster Padoy and amazing healing that he would do on people, and, different gifts that he had spiritually and whatever. And I just was like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Like, I want to learn to be, somebody who does these types of good things to help people, whatever. I mean, a lot of people, tell stories when Grandmaster Padoy was alive, people would come to his home for healing. He'd treat people with herbs, with massage, with healing, with prayer, hilo, things of that nature and whatever. Like, those types of stories for me were inspirational. It was just like, wow, like that's incredible. And then, when you see it reflected in your own culture, we just call it this in West Africa. They call it this in China. They call it this other thing here in Indonesia, whatever. To me, I think these things gives you a deep appreciation for humanity, and it shows you more connections, more of what we all have in common as humans all across the board, that we have more in common with one another than we do not in common. And so for me, it's just, these things just kind of help to open up doors for me being able to make friendships and connections with people in ways that I might not otherwise have been able to do, because I also had experiences that I could share and things that I could bring to the table, and be able to see some commonality behind things that we had. And it just, for me, every teacher I've ever had, whether it's martial arts, healing, spiritual, whatever, every single one of my teachers always said, keep an open mind, be very respectful. Whenever you go to somebody else's house, observe things the way that they do in their home. Just observe it. You don't have to agree with it. And you also have to tell somebody whether you agree with it or not. But it's just, you have home training and manners, and you show up. Wherever you're at, try to learn the customs of wherever it is that you're at, because it will open up doors to people being more favorable towards you, and you'll be able to make more friends. So every teacher I ever had always was like, go and learn this. Go and learn as much as you can to make yourself the best person that you can possibly be. And so, that's beyond the martial arts. For me, I think that's kind of what helped me to really enjoy martial arts even more.
This is like might be our most spectacular episode, in a while, because it's just so deep. Come on, man, give this guy a shout out, will you? I mean, like, Cali Doug was like, oh, this is going real FMA, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, you're giving the secrets. I had to kind of talk to Robert Neal, and I was like, Robert Neal, we'll ease up. Them forces, principalities, and the ancestors might get pissed off at us. And Tuhon Brandon Jordan, I was going to ask you, are you down for making a part 2, like maybe next month, concerning? Because this is just a lot of topics. We didn't even get to talk about in detail Guru Cliff and Kalindi Yi, because I really am so fascinated, because Kalindi Yi was, even prior to the time of his death, was always at the forefront of silo, exploration, essentially, of the mycelium, and incorporating that with martial arts, like what he's learning. That's why it's such a loss that we lost both of them within like a year of each other.
I mean, they just went one right after the other. I mean, but their work continues. They're our ancestors now, and so now the responsibility for us is to carry on what they, the work that they pioneered and the things that they've done. That's part of our responsibility, is to carry it forward. Continue doing these things. That's how these things. That's how these things continue on. It's how it's like, back home we always say, it's like people don't always, we don't really believe that people truly die. We just believe that people just change their form. You change from one form to another.
I really enjoyed this interface between shamanism, the deep Western African thought systems, and martial arts that we're talking about. People really need to hear this because it just shares so much great similarities with FMA back home. This is like FMA back home. It's literally what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of saddened that like people won't research the deeper topic, because the fighting efficacy, the different combat forms and sparring systems, that's really the base level. Yeah. If you want to go to the apex of the pyramid, like, learning different leaves and how to like correct the fascia, healing, epigenetic damage through like, sound.
Of course.
I mean, I just don't want to open my mouth because, you know what, maybe it's good that it's close to them,
I mean, listen, all I'll say is, my Baba told me a long time ago, everything is not for everyone. And truth be told, everything has a season, right? So some things that you might learn when you're a young man, that knowledge might be applicable. And then when you're in your 30s and 40s, you learn something different. And you're in your 50s and 60s, you learn, like in Yoruba, in West African culture, some things are taught to people based upon your age. In other words, if you're not at that particular age, that information doesn't have any use for you because you don't have enough life experience to be able to use it. So, sometimes everybody's in different stages of their life, and some things are just, some things are kept quiet, for a reason, because you want to keep things preserved. You want to make sure that the integrity of something is kept intact. You want to make sure that, that whatever you're teaching is going to be kept, and that it's going to be practiced with the integrity and the respect that it deserves. And, and I've said this many times, the truth is that once you teach something to somebody, you can't unteach it. So once you give something to someone, whether you have a falling out with this guy and say, hey, I strip him of all the rank and I never gave him anything. I've known this guy for the last 40 years, but I never really knew him. I didn't really give him a certificate, even though it's my signature, whatever. Cool. But at the end of the day, what you taught them can't be undone. What's been done can't be undone.
And I'll try to end with this because that's a very wonderful note to end on. I need to acknowledge what Robert Neal said. Lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of the understanding. My God, how deep, man. That might be the quote of like the last 2 months, bro. I want to end with this, and I'm doing this because I have deep love for your people. Because I'm telling you right now, out of all the FMA systems, I don't train Derobio, but from all my interaction with them, the different FMA styles throughout the planet, probably need to take a note from you guys, just how well you like this, like, you know what I mean? It's just like they all have different thoughts of how to make it work for them. They all have different methodologies, but in the end, like, it's like, why can't all FMA styles work? I don't want to name any names because that will just put a target in my back, right?
Of course.
But next month, I reached out to my Katipunan family contacts, and I want to do a Leyte Samar centric episode, and it's actually set down in stone now at May 23rd. I want all the Derobio that's watching this to please wait patiently for that episode. It's going to be a very detail-rich episode, and we will talk about the Proto-Katipunan, the Katipunan movement, Major Eugenio Daza, which was known here in the United States as the architect of the Balangiga massacre. What that was is a bunch of 100-something, American soldiers kind of got injured, and then several dozen died, and it's known as a massacre. On our side, we call it an encounter. Right. To us, we didn't massacre them because we were having a battle. You know what I mean? It's just the nature of the thing. That led to the order of killing everyone above 10 years old to be killed in that particular island. So there was a person that was court-martialed for that. Major Eugenio Daza was the person who basically surrendered to Frederick Grant, which was Ulysses S. Grant's son, Major General Frederick Grant, which was the head of the expeditionary force that came there. As revenge, the Americans stole the church bell, right? And it wasn't returned until about 3 years ago, about 2018 is when it came back to the town. I am very good friends with Major Eugenio Daza's great grandson, David J. I'm trying to get the Consulate of the Philippines involved with this and talk to other Katipunan families about this. Wow. And we will make this a theme episode. So for this particular May 23rd episode, we're going to concentrate on your region, the region of Derobio, which is Leyte Samar, because Eugenio is a very important figure in Filipino, in that part of Philippine history, in that area. Because not only was he a legendary figure about like the whole surrender to Grant gave him like a revolver and a flag to commemorate that surrender, that kind of thing. But a few years later, he was tasked to put down the Pulahan movement. Wow. A lot of the Pulahan leaders, the top two leaders, were his lieutenants during the Philippine-American War. So to him, it was like he's caught between a rock and a hard place, essentially.
Of course.
And yes, so was Faustino Ablen, which is he didn't really surrender. Yeah. Later on, Eugenio moved to another part of the Philippines, close to where the region of Abundio Bayet, the province of Laguna.
Okay.
His son served under the first Brigadier General of the Philippines to finish in West Point, Vicente Lim.
Wow.
And one of his sons, one of Eugenio's sons, was the first Filipino who graduated with an electrical engineering degree in the United States. And he founded PLDT, which is our equivalent of AT&T back home. So it's a very influential and powerful family.
Absolutely.
I am. That's the reason why I'm trying to fix. One of the reasons why I'm trying to fix FMA discussion, because I can't have my Katipunan family people back home getting pissed off at me and saying like, why would we allow ourselves to be interviewed by that good for nothing channel? Right. It takes a lot of personal risk for me, because as you said, there are guilds, there are secret orders that are still hidden today.
Sure.
That people don't talk about.
Yeah.
And just because those Freemasonic things, that the revolution ended, those families kept alliances that are in place until today.
Yes.
So the thing is, I'm doing this as a good service for you, because I just had really good experience with the Derobio family, essentially, in your particular system. So I'm kind of doing this as like showing my love and appreciation for, and for the people of Derobio, and then Leyte Samar. I'm gonna do so May 23rd. Please tell all your students about that.
Well, we'll pass on the word for that. Yeah, that's gonna be fan. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing that. That's gonna be enlightening.
all right, Tuhon. I'm gonna call you Kuya Tuhon Brandon Jordan.
Sounds good.
All right, Kuya Tuhon.
Okay, sounds good.
And then don't forget, I did a shout out in the beginning. Don't forget about GM Bobby's over the weekend. Just go to South Florida, Balintoa, to get all the details. And also, just maybe message Kuya Roger Arbulos of Astigmameco. Those are really two good seminars that you should partake in. Like, you just pick up like golden stuff. Mwah, right? And next episode, episode 134, Maya Soderholm. And you're going to love that one, because it's come on, she learned the feet of Sani Ompad, Visayan Cordo Cadena. So be on the lookout for that episode coming up. And I believe that is Thursday. Thank you. And this is Julius Vladimir Francisco signing off.